Where is the sincerity and moral determination of today's leaders at the vortex of this unacceptable violence? New Zealand has sacrificed many of its young men to wars in faraway lands. Fully 10% of the total population of New Zealand fought in the Great War, and we lost a fifth of them. So every year on the 25th of April, we commemorate their loss at Gallipoli, the site of terrible carnage. This year, in a dawn address, we recalled that despite the horror of that war on the Gallipoli Peninsula, fraternal bonds were forged between warring nations. Countries who were once enemies became friends. New Zealand never wants to experience the catastrophe of another world war. We must never be at another San Francisco conference picking up the pieces after another descent into global annihilation and human suffering. So we must do more, demand more, and deliver more. We must reject and resist those who seek to conquer and control. We must always seek the path of peace, because the lasting victories of humanity are those of peace, not war. Finally, despite our frustration at the lack of political will required to adapt this organisation to fully meet the challenges of today, New Zealand's support for the United Nations remains unwavering. That commitment is unchanged from when Prime Minister Fraser expressed his great hopes for the Charter 8 decades ago. We believe effective multilateral diplomacy means taking responsibility for our obligations as member states. So to that end, we announced today New Zealand's intention as a voice for smaller states to campaign for a seat on the Security Council for the 2039-40 term. That intention is supported by our enduring hope that the spirit of San Francisco can be reclaimed through the sincerity and moral determination of our diplomatic efforts, and that we can all do better, and that it reinforces our enduring support for the United Nations and the cause of peace. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Racing of New Zealand. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mbaye Mohammed, Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, responsible for the Arab world, diaspora, the Francophonie and African integration of the Comoros.
Excellencies, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Majesty, Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It is my honor to convey to you the warm greetings of His Excellency, Mr. Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros, as well as his wishes for every success in the conduct of this work which is of global significance. First and foremost, I wish to convey to the authorities of the United States, on behalf of our delegation, our warm gratitude for the warm welcome from you in New York during our participation during this 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I wish to also convey my warm greetings to His Excellency Philemon Yang on his election and we welcome his election to the presidency of the 79th session of the General Assembly. And I wish to tell him that we as Africans are honored by his presidency. I wish to pay a warm tribute to His Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis, for his wise, skillful stewardship and his commitment to peace and development during his presidency of the 78th session of the General Assembly, the proceedings of which were steered by him. And lastly, on behalf of my country, I wish to thank His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, for his commitment to peace and development.
Monsieur le Président, ces sessions de l'Assemblée générale de l'ONU, souvent encore une fois un moment particulièrement délicat de la vie de la communauté internationale. Depuis le 22 février 2022, la guerre en Ukraine ne cesse de ravager deux grands pays européens, mettant en danger l'équilibre du monde. Au nom de l'Union des Comoros, j'implore les dirigeants russes et ukrainiens à emprunter le chemin du dialogue et de la négociation. Je les sollicite pour leur peuple, pour la marque qu'ils laisseront dans l'histoire, mais aussi parce que le cessez-le-feu d'abord, la paix ensuite, sont les conditions indispensables d'un apaisement économique et social et alimentaire pour le monde entier, en particulier pour l'Afrique, qui souffre de tant de ce conflit.
Development for the entire world, in particular in Africa, which has been plagued by conflict. I now turn to Palestine. In light of the realities endured on a day-to-day basis, there is no doubt that we are not seeing legitimate defense. This war has been punctuated by disproportionate use of force, largely targeting innocent people. This is the purest form of genocide perpetrated by the Israeli forces in Gaza, which we condemn. And there's an urgent need to bring this to an end. The horrors endured by the people of Palestine have been reflected in our daily reality as we see the deaths of more than 40,000 people, including women and innocent children, more than 100,000 injured people, forced displacements of thousands of people under inhumane conditions, as well as the systematic destruction of hospitals and residential buildings. Our country reaffirms our full solidarity and our steadfast support to the fraternal people of Palestine. We beseech the international community to act for an immediate cessation of hostilities and for a rapid resumption of the delivery of humanitarian assistance.
À une solution juste et durable, fondée sur le droit international, les résolutions pertinentes des Nations Unies. Nous exhortons en particulier la communauté internationale à œuvrer rapidement en vue de parvenir à une solution à deux États. Un État palestinien souverain avec Jérusalem-Est comme capitale et vivant côte à côte en parfaite sécurité avec Israël. Nous saluons l'admission de l'État de Palestine en tant que membre de plein droit de l'ONU, à sa participation aux travaux de l'ONU à compte de la présente session. Je rappelle aussi que la situation est également très grave en Cisjordanie. Et comme le souligne le cardinal Pizzaballa, patriarche latin de Jérusalem, ce qui se passe est un exemple palpable et concret dont la façon dont la haine, le ressentiment, le mépris ont conduit à des formes de violence de plus en plus extrêmes et de plus en plus difficiles à contenir. La situation au Soudan retient également toute notre attention. Nous appelons les deux parties au conflit à la retenue pour épargner les populations des affres de cette guerre qui, pour des frères, n'a que trop duré.
peoples has lasted for
S'agissant
far
du Sahara
too long.
occidental,
I now turn to Western
l'Union des
Sahara.
Comores
The
estime
Union of the
que le plan
Comoros
d'autonomie de
believes
ces
that
territoires au
the
sein
autonomy
du
plan for
royaume
this territory
charifiant
within the Sharifian
présenté de
Kingdom,
2007
submitted in
par les autorités
2007
marocaines,
by the Moroccan authorities,
constitue le moyen le plus
is
sûr
the surest
de
way
parvenir à un règlement durable des
a
conflits
lasting settlement to
anachroniques
the anachronistic
dont la
conflict.
perpétuation
The
serait
perpetuation of
contraire
this
aux
conflict
intérêts
runs counter
même des populations
to the
concernées,
interest of the
au
peoples
développement
concerned
économique
and
de toute la
towards
région.
the economic development of the
Mon
entire
pays
region.
appelle donc
My country,
les
therefore,
parties
calls upon
prenantes
the
à y adhérer
stakeholders
et
to
enjoint la
embrace
communauté
this.
internationale
We urge the
de
international
leur
community
apporter
to
son soutien.
extend its
Je
support for
voudrais
this.
d'autre part
On the other
souligner
hand,
que
I
le droit
wish to
international
stress
et l'ouverture au
that
dialogue
international law and openness to
doivent
dialogue
prévaloir
need to
dans
prevail
l'appréhension des problèmes
with
et
a
surtout
grasp of the
politiques.
problems, but
Il en
particularly
va de
political
même
issues. The
concernant
same
le respect de
applies
l'intégrité
to respect
territoriale
for
des États.
the territorial integrity of
Aussi
states.
s'agissant de la question de l'île
And
comorienne de
as for the
Mayotte,
question of the
je
Comoran
voudrais
island of
rappeler
Mayotte, let
que
us
l'unité
recall
comorienne
that
est une
Comoran
réalité
unity is
fondée
a
sur des données
reality based
ethno-géographiques,
on
linguistiques,
ethno-geographic,
religieuses,
linguistic,
économiques,
religious, and
malgré
economic
le caractère
data,
insulaire du
despite
pays.
the fact that this
cela
is an
s'ajoute
island nation.
un
And this
attachement
is in
du pays
addition
au
to the
principe
country's
sacro-saint
commitment
du droit
to the
international,
sacrosanct
des
principles of
résolutions
international
pertinentes des
law
Nations Unies,
and to the
lesquelles
resolutions of the
reconnaissent
United
la souveraineté des
Nations, which
Comores
recognize
sur
the
l'île de
sovereignty
Mayotte.
of Comoros
Ainsi,
over the island of
J'ai
Mayotte.
saisi l'occasion de
I
ma
therefore
présence
wish to take this
sur
opportunity,
cette tribune des
being
Nations
present
Unies,
here on the
symbole
rostrum
du
of the General
multilatéralisme par
Assembly,
excellence,
eminent
pour
symbol of
réaffirmer
multilateralism,
la
to
constance du
reaffirm
gouvernement
the
comorien
steadfast
dans sa volonté de
desire
respecter le
of
droit
the government of
et son
Comoros to
ouverture au
respect
dialogue
law,
et ce
rule
différend
of
qui
law,
oppose
and our
l'Union
openness to
des Comores à la
dialogue
France
when it comes to this
afin de
dispute
parvenir à
pitting
une
the
solution
kingdom
juste
of
et durable
pitting the Union of
capable
Comoros
de
against
préserver les
France.
intérêts partagés
And this is
entre
important
nos deux
to
pays
achieve a
amis.
fair, lasting solution to safeguard the shared
L'Union des
interests
Comores
of our friendly
réitère son adhésion
countries.
à la
The
résolution
Union of
adoptée par le
Comoros
sommet de
reiterates our
l'avenir,
commitment to the
tenu ce
declaration
22
adopted
septembre
at the Summit for the
2024,
Future, which was held on
marge des
22
travaux de cette
September
Assemblée générale
on
des
the
Nations Unies.
sidelines of the
Nous
General
plaidons
Assembly.
pour une réelle
We
collaboration
advocate
internationale
meaningful
afin
international cooperation
d'établir des
to
lignes
establish
directrices permettant
guidelines
d'aboutir à
in
des
order
outils
to shape
juridiques
legal tools
garantissant le
guaranteeing
développement et
development
l'utilisation équitable
and
d'une intelligence
equitable use
artificielle
of artificial intelligence
propice au développement de
in
la
order to ensure that
croissance,
this help
de la
to result
productivité,
in
de la
growth,
connaissance
productivity,
partout
and
dans
growth
le
of
monde.
productivity and knowledge
Cette
throughout the
résolution
world.
ouvre,
This
entre
declaration ushers
des
in,
perspectives
inter alia,
prometteuses
promising
dans la prise en compte
prospects
des problèmes
in terms of
spécifiques
taking on
des
board
petits
and
États
tackling
insulaires
specific
en
issues
développement.
faced by small island
Dans ce
developing
cadre,
states.
la
In
conférence
this regard,
CID 4
the
qui s'est
SIDS 4
tenue en mai
conference,
dernier à
which was
Antigua
held
et
last May
Barbuda,
in Antigua and
a
Barbuda,
marqué elle aussi
also
un nouveau progrès
was an
dans cette prise de
important step
conscience
forward in
universelle.
this universal
C'est aussi
awareness.
parce que nous appelons au strict
And we
respect de
call
l'accord de
for
Paris et
stringent
un soutien
respect
financier
for
et
the Paris
technique
Agreement,
conséquent
as
que
well
nous attendons avec beaucoup d'intérêt.
meaningful
La
and
prochaine
appropriate
conférence sur
levels
le
of financial and
financement du
technical
développement
support.
revient en
We
Espagne en
anticipate
2025.
with great
Cette
interest, we
conférence
eagerly anticipate the
constituera
next
une
conference on financing
opportunité
for
pour les
development to
États
be
du
held in
Sud
Spain in
de
2025.
plaider pour les
This
réformes,
conference
pour
will
les
be an
réformes
opportunity for states
des
in the
banques et
South
institutions
to
multilatérales de développement
champion
et
reforms
d'obtenir en
in
faveur de nos
banks and
pays
multilateral
un
institutions,
cadre
development
prévisionnel
institutions,
de ressources
as well as
durables,
to
accessibles,
ensure a
prévisibles.
a predictable framework
de cet
for
événement,
sustainable
je
resources
souhaite
that
que
are
les pays
acceptable,
concernés au premier
accessible and
chef
predictable.
ne tardent pas à
To
se
ensure the
réunir
success of
pour
this
travailler ensemble à la
event,
formulation de leurs
we
propositions.
cherish the hope that countries
Monsieur le
concerned
Président,
will
la paix et la
unite
stabilité
to work
politique
together to set
sont les deux
out
piliers
their
essentiels
proposals.
devant
Peace
soutenir toute action
and
de
political
développement.
stability are two critical
Aussi,
pillars
à la suite des élections du
underpinning
14 janvier
development
2024,
initiatives.
ayant reconduit son
Following the
Excellence
elections
M.
on
Azali
14
Assoumani
January
à la
2024, which
magistrature
resulted
suprême
in His
du
Excellency
pays,
Mr. Azali Assoumani
celui-ci
taking up the
s'est
Supreme
attelé à
Magistrature of the
poursuivre la
country,
noble mission
Mr.
d'accélérer
Assoumani
l'émergence des Comores
to
d'ici
advance the noble
2030.
mission of
L'engagement du
accelerating
chef de
our
l'État
development by
pour accélérer
2030.
l'émergence du
Our
pays
head of state
se
has
traduit par la réalisation des projets phares contenus dans le plan Comores émergents et présenté lors de la conférence de partenaires au développement des Comores tenue à Paris en décembre 2019. Le plan Comores émergent dispose également de projets structurants dont le programme de développement de l'économie bleue, secteur préporteur qui constitue l'un des moteurs de la transformation économique et sociale. Conscient du rôle crucial de l'économie bleue et en tenant à relever la particularité des États insulaires, mon pays a organisé à Moroni, en juin 2023, sous la présidence comorienne de l'Union africaine, avec l'appui de certains partenaires, la conférence des ministres sur l'économie bleue et l'action climatique sous le thème des États insulaires à l'avant-garde. Celle-ci a vu la participation de tous les États insulaires et côtiers d'Afrique. La déclaration de Moroni, adoptée à l'issue de cette conférence, détermine entre autres les éléments de la feuille de route à exécuter en vue de la prise en compte de la particularité de la vulnérabilité de ces États par la communauté internationale. La prochaine conférence sur les océans nous offrira l'occasion de présenter la déclaration de Moroni, dont les engagements convergent avec les objectifs mondiaux en matière de développement durable. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement comorien accorde une attention particulière à la jeunesse. Plusieurs initiatives sont en cours pour développer l'entrepreneuriat de jeunes, assurer de meilleures opportunités d'emploi dans les divers secteurs et leur faire jouer un rôle de premier plan dans le développement socio-économique du pays. La promulgation de la loi Un jeune, un emploi traduit cette volonté qui l'anime. L'attachement du chef de l'État de l'Union des Comores à l'épanouissement de la jeunesse, mais aussi la confiance qu'il accorde à cette catégorie de la population pour impulser une dynamique nouvelle en tant que force motrice du pays, l'a conduit à nommer il y a quelques mois un gouvernement majoritairement formé de jeunes cadres. Il a ainsi pris le pari d'engager avec la jeunesse la transformation du pays pour le renouveau des Comores. Au-delà de ce domaine clé, le chef de l'État a également retenu le sport, la culture, l'art et le patrimoine dans son agenda quinquennal, marquant ainsi son intérêt pour ce volet social qui contribue à bien façonner et à bien renforcer notre identité nationale. Aussi, pour ce qui est du sport, au nom du président de l'Union des Comores et de son gouvernement, je rends un vibrant hommage à notre équipe nationale de Sélacan pour les performances qu'ils réalisent de plus en plus sur le continent à la grande fierté du peuple comorien. Monsieur le Président, les défis qui se posent au monde d'aujourd'hui sont multiples. C'est une action conjuguée de nous tous pour y faire face. Cette session qui a lieu regroupant cette assemblée est un espoir pour les peuples de voir se pointer des changements de tout ce qui fait leurs angoisses et leurs appréhensions. Au nom de valeurs nobles qui nous unissent, œuvrons pour transformer ces angoisses en apaisement, ces appréhensions en espoir et surtout en réalisation des aspirations de nos peuples respectifs. Thank you very much for your attention.
To the aspirations of our respective peoples. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, responsible for the Arab world, diaspora, the Francophonie, and African integration of the Comoros. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Dominique Hassler, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Education and Sport of Liechtenstein.
Mr. President, the UN is a special meeting place for all countries. This is what our head of state said in his very first speech at the UN General Assembly when Liechtenstein became a member 34 years ago. It is a singular forum where not only countries come together, but peoples. I was very young then, just about to enter high school, but I remember vividly the sense of significance that prevailed among us back in 1990. The wish to safeguard our sovereignty was a key incentive for us, a theme that resonates so strongly among many, many small states today. We have never seen membership as just an end in itself. The United Nations has been a key foreign policy platform for Liechtenstein. We have made a significant political investment, developed our own profile, been an independent voice, and put forward our own initiatives, most recently the Veto Initiative. For us, the people and the government of Liechtenstein, the main purpose of the United Nations remains peace and security, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, in the immortal words of the UN Charter. It saddens me to say that this purpose has lost none of its relevance today. The aggression against Ukraine, planned and perpetrated by those who wield power in the Russian Federation, has not only destroyed the European security architecture, it has undermined the international legal order as such. And it has created a real risk and genuine fear of future illegal war-making, not just in our part of the world. After enjoying long decades of peace, which is much more than the absence of war, our people have been able to live in prosperity and with full respect for human rights. As a small state, without armed forces, the guarantor of our sovereignty is respect for international law, which the UN embodies like no other organization. Our unequivocal stance in support of Ukraine is thereof a commitment to the international order and ultimately to our own security. More than 2 years of brutal war of aggression have brought immeasurable human suffering, economic devastation of immense proportions, and environmental damage for decades to come. Many of these outcomes are, sadly, irreversible. But together, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to bring about a just peace. And indeed, there will be no peace without justice. Peace must therefore be based on the terms we have already set together in this hall. And it must ensure individual criminal accountability for those who have, willfully and unprovoked, initiated this war of aggression. This alone will ensure that there is a prospect for sustainable peace for Ukraine, but also for the region as a whole. This alone will give small states everywhere the confidence and belief that their sovereignty and territorial integrity will be protected and safeguarded here at the United Nations, while demonstrating that we are committed and able to fulfill the purpose that has brought us together in this organization. Mr. President, much of what we have done in recent years here in New York was driven by the belief that we must safeguard the role of the United Nations in maintaining peace and security. We support a strong Security Council, but see little indication that it will be able to come together in the way the current challenges require. Rather than criticizing and lamenting what is a political reality, we have to think about alternative avenues, avenues that do indeed exist. This assembly is the key platform in this respect. It has taken the lead on Ukraine, and it has adopted important decisions on the Gaza war. And under the terms of the Veto Initiative, which has resonated so strongly in this hall, it is given the option to act whenever the Council is paralyzed by a veto. The Pact of the Future has given us the necessary basis to continue what we have begun and to chart a new path for peace and security. Only in working together we will be able to deliver on this promise. Mr. President, for almost a year now, the situation in the Middle East has absorbed much of our attention. We have witnessed with horror the terrorist attack on the civilian population of Israel on the 7th of October. And we are shocked and appalled by the suffering of the civilian population of Gaza, the many thousands of innocent victims, a very large number of children among them, which is simply unacceptable. The protection of civilians is a key priority on the agenda of the United Nations. However, it seems to be a mere afterthought for those making the decisions on both sides of the conflict, whose actions cause human suffering and threaten stability in the region. We are deeply concerned about the next level of escalation between Israel and Hezbollah and join the call for a 21-day ceasefire in order to prevent a further conflagration in the region. Liechtenstein is a strong supporter of the two-state solution. As such, we prioritize the protection of all civilians affected in our response and in our decision-making. We have contributed humanitarian assistance to the civilian population. We have called for the full respect for international humanitarian law by all, and with that I call, again, for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. We support the efforts by the International Criminal Court to investigate according to its mandate. The two-state solution, which enjoys overwhelming support among all of us in this hall, was decided by this very assembly many decades ago. There is no other conflict where the United Nations has a clearer and longer-lasting responsibility. The end of the war in Gaza will only be one step in the long and difficult path to a two-state solution that allows Israel and Palestine to live together in peace and security in line with the right of self-determination of all peoples. Knowing that this will take time, it is even more important that all actors stop escalating the conflict further and that the human suffering ends today. The UN and each single member state need to live up to the goal we have set ourselves many years ago and bring this conflict to an end. Mr. President, the sovereign equality of all countries and respect for international law are key for all UN members to thrive, but for smaller ones, even more so. It is no surprise then that in this building, my country is known in particular for our clear and consistent stance in support of the rule of law. We are proud of the work we have done on international law. And it is a commitment we are determined to continue, especially as there is no doubt that international law is under attack from more sides and in more ways than ever before. Today, I call on you. I call on all of us to face this challenge as an opportunity, to come together and unite in a way that brings together all who need international law upheld for their survival and prosperity. All of whose best and sometimes only defense is that the rules governing the contact between states since 1945 are actually enforced. All of us who are willing to stand up for each other, driven by both solidarity and enlightened self-interest. Today, it is a moment for us to realize that we must not take the existence of the United Nations for granted, that this organization's foundation is rooted in international law, but also that it is us in this room that have the power and means necessary if we work together. Doom and gloom are not the hallmark of leadership. We are encouraged by the fact that small states in particular are increasingly standing up for the rule of law and against the rule of might. We are gratified to see that the International Court of Justice and its decisions is looked at for guidance in our decision-making in challenges ranging from the two-state solution to the applicability of the Genocide Convention to climate change. This is a good and, more importantly, a necessary time to be the change that we want to see in the world. Mr. President, we politicians have the privilege, the agency, and a voice that we have to use. This, in my view, comes also with the obligation to speak up for those who do not have a voice. In a shockingly literal sense, the women of Afghanistan do not have a voice at all anymore. I therefore want to speak up for them from this podium. The denial of even their most basic human rights must be completely unacceptable for this organization and its representatives. We will continue to demand that the United Nations lives up to its special obligation and supports action to fight this extreme case of gender persecution. We must also speak up against the brutal oppression of women in Iran. Women across the world have been speaking up as agents of change for many years. We must ensure those voices are amplified at the highest level. As experience has shown, we will get better results for everyone if we entrust leadership positions much more often to women. As many others, I believe that it is a credibility challenge for the United Nations that a woman has yet to lead this organization. After decades of talking about gender equality, the United Nations should shine as an example. Mr. President, we simply need to do what we have promised. On peace, the central mission of this organization, on gender equality, on human rights, on deterring aggression, and on ensuring accountability. The collective action so urgently needed today requires strong leadership, which is often lacking today. Leadership, whether by woman or man, comes with responsibility, accountability, and with the ability and willingness to listen to and work in the interest of those we represent. All of us that have had the privilege to speak from this podium have an obligation to present and future generations to deliver on the great hopes placed in our United Nations. Only then is this organization the singular place that serves the people of the world in their desire for world peace. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Education and Sport of Liechtenstein. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Maria Malmer Stenergard, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Sweden.
Mr. President, Excellencies, we are gathered in this assembly while the world and this organization are facing major and existential challenges. We are gathered while we are witnessing an unprecedented number of armed conflicts, from Ukraine to Sudan, the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and Gaza. We are gathered while we are failing at our collective goal of maintaining international peace and security, of saving future generations from the horrors of war and from the disastrous consequences of underdevelopment and climate change.